We live?
Ooh, good fill. Fuck it up, Buttercup. I haven't heard that one before.
So rad.
Jeez. Was that it?
I don't know. Did we get pulled?
We just kidding. We're gonna pause it there. But that was wild, guys.
That's the band Flowers for Persephone. Check them out on everything. That's fucking rad. Just the name alone should warrant a follow amongst this community. So.
Where are they from?
Ohio, I think.
Oh, of course.
I'm pretty sure they're from Ohio.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, that band's fucking rad, and that's like the most Bacchic shit like you're ever gonna witness. It's by definition like it's like the description when you look up like what this Bacchic stuff that everybody's so excited about. You know what I mean? And that's like it never stopped, right? Like it never stopped. Look, it's still happening in backyards in Ohio.
This is something that I recognize, just growing up in the punk scene, like I think I've talked on this channel a lot about goth because there's that literary component to goth, but the punk scene is the embodiment of the Dionysian madness, right? That wild, youthful freedom and that fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, right? That's such a truism. And then that band was just perfect, right? You see trans people, you see front woman right out there just screaming her head off, right? The cameraman is a pink wizard. I was like, this is wild.
Oh man,
the lead singer looked like Sailor Moon, right?
The call out before the breakdown, fuck it up, Buttercup.
I never heard that one. That's a good one.
It's so good, dude. Like,
right?
It's like when this stuff is being described, like if you don't have that in your mind when you're reading about this Bacchic, like Amazonian, Median, Lemnos rites, the Samos rites, like all of this stuff is describing this like community, backyard community stuff, and like anybody who's ever grown up as part of that kind of scene knows like, there's lore behind stuff. There's there's very clear archetypes that present themselves when you put so many characters on stage screaming their heads into a microphone. You know what I mean? Like every single Jungian archetype is going to present itself when you give it the opportunity, when you let the muse do her thing. When you become what we just witnessed as a vessel for the muse, like, that was a person absolutely just, giving themselves to the muse, and just whatever comes up comes out. You know what I mean? And the entire band, is setting the tune for that to be made possible. Like, all of this stuff is what is being described in all of these ancient texts. Just because it was written in Greek squiggly lines doesn't mean that we need to freak out about the Greek squiggly lines, y'all. Like, you just look, like, and that was in your language, and it's the most Greek shit that everybody freaks out about. Like, so what? You don't need to learn Mother Greek. Like, Mother Greek is just squiggly lines on a piece of paper, and like some utterances that correlate with those. Like, who cares?
That brings up an interesting thing I'd love to talk to you about, both of you guys. But before we do, I want to introduce our audience here. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So everyone, welcome to Flying Down the Dragon. Thank you for coming into our beautiful show. And today we're interviewing my good longtime friends, as you can see why we just dove into our shenanigans, Mandy and Skobie. And Mandy and Skobie, as many of you will already know, are the writers of the ongoing satirical mythology and philosophy and comedy series, The Towel of Minerva. And they're here because they're releasing volume 2 in their hardcover edition of the series. And this stuff is awesome because you get basically all of the previous volumes, right? In this one, from volume 1 to volume 5. And this is a nice hardcover. You got some really awesome art by Bandy, I saw. Let me try and pull it up.
Yeah, pull it up on Skobie's store there.
I was up very late last night working on that.
Yeah, and it's live now. You can go and you can buy it. You can order it.
So here we go. Oh, sorry. StreamYard gets a little weird on me. I'm a little weird with StreamYard, is what I should say. The program works fine. But yeah, you can purchase this on Skobie One's website or on Amazon. Both of the links you can find in the description. Whoa, but that's the amazing cover.
Yeah, sorry, Snappy, you're throwing me off because like the price in America is different than in Canada. So
right.
What the hell is that?
It's like when you're driving and it says, and you cross the line and it says 100.
Oh yeah.
And it's like you speed up to 100 miles per hour. Like, I'm going way too fast. It's going 60. It's like 60.
Man, and I'm feeling it lately. The exchange is so bad at the moment. So
man.
So.
I don't think I've ever seen it more on your side than on our side since I can't remember. I don't know. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, usually you guys are cheaper
in Canada.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Am I
usually
wrong?
we're much more expensive. Yeah, we're much more expensive generally in Canada. But there was a long time, like in the 90s and early 2000s, where things were more at parity.
Oh, that's
and
my brain's stuck there. So
yeah. But generally, it's like our stuff is more expensive. You guys come and do your shopping in our country rather than the other way around, but and I know that just because I grew up on a border town, and we loved going to the States, but you feel it. Your money does not go as far. But yeah, this is such a beautiful edition, guys. I'm really excited that you guys are doing this. It's really, really awesome. Amazing art. Really, really cool. And you guys are offering signed editions with all kinds of swag and stickers. That's always something fun that you guys do. And amazing.
Yeah, so we do like you were saying, we do 5 volumes every year. The hardcover is all 4 of the volumes from that year, plus a skeleton key that you can only get if you buy the hardcover. So to actually unlock all of the books, you have to buy the hardcover to actually truly understand what's going on. And ultimately, they're really just a like a hypersigil meant for doing bibliomancy anyway. So you're fully at your own will for how it is you engage with the book. You know what I mean? It's up to your own devices and your own intention. Everybody's going to get something different out of it. And that's kind of the point of it and the fun part of it. And, that's why we have such a cool community where they can, have some forethought on how they can pull different thoughts out and understand, their relationship to where they are with the rest of the books, and kind of think about some of the stuff like
this is the interesting thing, getting into the series, right? You have the ongoing kind of story that your brother and you are telling with Arcturus and Vega that's kind of meandering throughout.
Yes.
Then you have kind of your ongoing aphorism series where you wax poetic about the Towel of Minerva, and you kind of recycle a lot of these mystical quotes. You sound like I catch you using some words that I use on tarot, and I'm like, man, I hope I don't sound that pretentious sometimes. But you that Deepak Chopra type language, and then of course you got a bunch of recipes that you always throw in, random memes. You have the writings of Grandpa Leather and Sketch. Trying to remember his name. Sketch the Cataclysm, poetry by Sirius, and as well as all kinds of other people. So it's a really neat series, and as you engage with it, you start to see all these different threads that continue in volume 2, right? So that I thought was really cool.
Meandering's a good way to say it, because we've never sat down and be like, all right, we have to tell this story at this point on this book and go through this, and it's always a hodgepodge. It's never really there's no like through line. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and
absolutely.
When you balance the hodge and the podge, it's how you obtain slack.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
I mean, there are key magical themes that are really fun. That if people know, they'll have a lot of fun with the book. The big one being, the Towel of Minerva is the thread of fate, is the grand weave of tapestry, but it is also Athena's tampon. So if you can recognize those kind of layers, it becomes a little more funny.
I wish I had that one on like ready, because I never thought of it to say it that way. Somebody stopped me at a show and was like, please tell me about your hat. And I was like, well, it's a, is it a sex joke? Is it that this, to that? And like, it's nobody knows. And like, man, if I had the tampon ready, that would have been perfect.
It's all those things, right?
And it's the wool that was used to soak up what ultimately became Erichthonius. It's it's where you get the Erichthonius wool from. So it's all.
I always thought it could be a dish rag.
The
we use that the bar rag. Yeah, we use
clean
the
up
bar
the bar,
rag.
right?
Yeah. It is all of those things, because it's
it's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor. It's an allegory. It's
exactly.
It's meant to show you how easily language can break down. You know what I mean? And like how getting caught up in ancient Greek, it's like, fuck off. Like it's just a language, and they all suck. So like stop crying about all of these mother Greek and the words and the this and the that, because we're chaos magicians. So we're meant to do the blending and the dissection and the rejecting of old things that didn't work, and the revamping of new things and the experimentation. You know what I mean? It's progressive that we're trying to do here. It's not.
Let's show them what we're talking about, so people can get a taste here. This is a really fun one that I'll just give a quick read. Minerva's towel is a napkin of eternity, yet it cannot be clutched. It is given, not taken. It waits beside the plate of the soul's hunger, reminding us that even the gods must clean their chins after a feast of fate. But beware, to claim it as one's own, to wrap it around the neck as if it were a bib of mastery, is hubris. It is not there to shield against the stains of experience, but to remind us that every taste, bitter, sweet, charred, or overripe, leaves a trace. To wipe too quickly is to forget. To linger in the touch of cloth upon lip is to savor the history of all that has passed through the mouth of time. And you can see this kind of mythic, poetic, satirical language, this performative language at play. We all recognize this from listening to any kind of new age speaker, from reading any kind of magical book. You're going to see this kind of stuff, and it's hilarious. But it's also just, if you think about this on the level of satire, then it's a good laugh. But also, if you think about it as the tapestry of fate, it still works. It's still, what is the point of this thing? It's supposed to unite us all. It's supposed to absorb all of that experience, and it's supposed to connect us in that experiential feeling. right? And that's what you're really talking about here
Yeah.
in a meandering, ridiculous way.
And you know, the meandering and the mixing and the diatribing was, you know, that was the cynics like preferred mode of doing sophistry, you know, because it's
Yeah.
an sophistic sophistry, right? Like, I'm showing you what sophists are doing, but I'm telling you that I'm doing it as satire, right? Like, I'm parodying that, but I'm also good at it. So it's like, you know, when Andy Kaufman, you know, puts on his anti comedy show where like he's doing bad parodies and bad impressions, and then bust out the most beautiful Elvis impression in a different character. Like, it's like the release of that and like the juxtaposition and all of those things is like, that's why it's so funny. Like, if you didn't sit through the whole routine to see the payoff and you just left because you go, oh, this is bad impressions or whatever, like, you're never going to get the joke. You are the joke. Like, the joke is that like people in the crowd are watching other people get up and leave because they don't know that the payoff is awesome. You know,
it's
like,
it's one of these things where like you kind of revel in the fact that it's a joke and you're open about the joke. Okay. What it reminds me of in some ways is someone like Stirner, but the difference between someone like Max Stirner, right, where he's satirizing Hegelianism, is he recreates that Hegelian lens exactly to the point where like people don't know how to react to it because they hyper authoritize that whole systematic framework. So you still have people arguing about how real it is, how true it is, taking it deadly seriously, where I don't think anyone is going to take your stuff seriously, but it ultimately is done in the same effect, right? You're trying to mock a very specific way of framing, just as like Stirner is. He's engaging in Hegelian praxis for the purposes of destroying Hegelian praxis. You're engaging in this mythopoetic sophistry for the point of pointing out the absurdity of the sophistry, right?
Yeah, just like Stirner was doing, you know, eristic counter Hegelianism, I'm doing eristic counter cynicism. You know what I mean? Like, and when you understand that what it is I'm doing is cynicism, you can go, oh, okay, like, how did cynicism influence all of the things that, you know, I'm parodying? And you go, oh, the people that took it seriously didn't know what the cynics were doing. They lost the thread a long time ago and started taking it literally. Where these are, you know, the cynics were doing performance art with the, you know, it's behold Plato's human and it's a plucked chicken, you know, like that is what we're doing.
We talked about this a lot, but when you start to read about these cynics, right, like you're surviving by charity. Most of these guys were performance artists, juggler, like part of the whole thing of going out and attacking society and mocking people in this really like, and they're doing it in the most poetic way imaginable because they're putting on a show in order to get food. And if they don't put on a good enough show, they may go out. They may go without, you know, like that's the reality of the cynic. These people are as hardcore as you can get, you know?
Yeah, you know, and they you know, cynicism literally means like a dog, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we've gone over this a bunch of times where we invented a satirical school of philosophy where we take cynicism to the extreme, and to the extreme is to Hades. And what do you find when you do that? Cerberus. And you go into the underworld and you start being a Cerberesian cynic. And it turns out, oh, that's the key to the catabasis, right? How you have to get past Cerberus to get through the catabasis, right? And that's one of those things that is overlooked, and that's actually what the mystery is how do you get past Cerberus? How did other people do it? How do you do it? You know, which technique are you going to do? Which one are you? Which road are you going to travel?
We've talked about this. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but you know, this is something that is really deeply, you know, a lot of people, even a lot of classicists, get all confuddled with this stuff. Okay, because you know, part of it is the nature of what you're really doing, and what a lot of people fail to recognize is you're connecting that Cerberus image to its mother image, Hecate. And this is where all that catabasis starts to come in, because once you recognize that direct connection, now you're at the crossroad. Well, you always were at the crossroads, but now you're dealing with the goddess of the dead, and magic. But the key secret of Hecate is what? Hecate is the hidden light in the darkness. She is the power behind the sun and the moon, the force that unites Apollo and Artemis, right? That's why you always have that trinity, right? It's the mother and the twins always. And she represents that, the vacuum, the womb, the absolute chaos. It's not nothing in the sense of ex nihilo like the Christians talk about, but it is from out of that primordial chaos comes the twins. Crowley talks about this. He calls it the equation of 0 equals 2, and he connects it to an interrelated deity called Mut, the vulture, which has often been connected with Medea. And it's this great mother type magic again, in that cyclical nature magic. But yeah, what we're seeing with this Cerberus imagery is it's connecting you to that deep goddess tradition, to this tradition of unveiling yourself. And look at what the Cynics are all about. The Cynics are all about rejecting society and returning to nature as if they are enlightened. So there's almost like throughout a lot of the cynical nature, and especially with the imagery that they invoke, the dogs, they're at the crossroads, they're living off of charity. Who's giving the charity? The priestess of Hecate. There's a deep connection to the cult of Hecate that's unspoken, right? And there's a lot to be gleaned here. You know what I mean?
Well, there's some connections to Buddhism too, right? Where like the monks would only get offerings and things like that, and they gave up all their worldly possessions, and they disappeared to wherever temples or whatever they did, and it's very similar.
When you go back into these ancient traditions, okay, these Near Eastern traditions, when I look at the Greek, I look at the Buddhist, I look at many of the Indians, they all have Indian traditions, which includes Buddhism, right? They all have this similar kind of monastic framing, right? What I call like the sadhu, which are these people who go back to a more like naturalistic lifestyle. They stop cutting their hair. They give up their possessions. They go live in the woods. At a certain point in classical Indian civilization, this even becomes codified in the framework for how the ideal person is meant to live life. By the time you reach a certain point in your old age, after you have achieved and overcome your responsibilities, you're meant to give up your possessions and live as one of these people in harmony with nature in the woods until you die. So this is like an explicit understanding across all these cultures, and what I think it is it's returning back to a more ancient wild root, right? You also have to remember, while there's the Greek civilization, there are also people who are still living a very near cynical lifestyle just outside of the city gates, in the woods and all around, right? So like these people are, what they're doing is they're coming into the city and they're rejecting the city and calling people back to the pagan. The Cynics in many ways are the ultimate pagans in that true Roman sense of the word, as the rustic, as the rural, as the one connected back to nature, because they're rejecting modern civilization for that more harmonious life, that life that lives embodied in nature, right? You see that with who's the main cynic guy, Diogenes, right? Yeah. Diogenes embodies this to the key, right? He says that there's no difference between man and dogs, and that if we lived like we were dogs, we would be happy and more empowered, right? That we should stop trying to build and start trying to live. It's a wild sense. It's almost like the Cynics are calling us back to that Saturnian golden age. When you read about this golden age in the Roman literature especially, they talk about it as this time of matriarchal power, when everything was unwritten, there were no explicit laws, and people lived in this radical kind of community love where everyone was free to do what they wanted. And in many, it is mythologized, right? It is hyper mythologized, but that's how the Romans saw that pre-agriculture time. And there is this constant throughout the Greco-Roman world callback to that, and it's really embodied in the Cynics.
Yeah, I mean, and you can even see that in sort of the quasi-cynic that Socrates is when he reminds you about, what it is the Greeks need if they want all of their precious dipping sauces for their nuggies.
Right. You want your spices, then you're going to have to build the empire of Alexander.
Exactly. If you want your dipping sauces for your nuggies, you're going to have to colonize people. They're going to revolt against you, which means you're going to have to give really big armies, which means you're going to have to abuse children to traumatize them into fooling them into, fighting for you. And then you're going to have to give them 40 acres and a meal, and then you're going to have to feed them, which means you're going to have, and then those Greek fighters are going to get, the desire to have sauce for their nuggies too. So you're just going to have to, it's this, snowballing effect where it just bigger and bigger and bigger nuggie sauce. And that's you want your little dippy sauces for your nuggies. And Socrates tried telling you. And look at where we're at right now. Where we're at right now. Socrates said it, and
I look at like for the British Empire, it was sugar, and that led to slavery. For the American Empire, it's oil, and that's led to globalism and American hegemony. And the imperialism that we're seeing and is causing everyone to stay up at night. But it's all for the sake of that kind of power and control, right? For those commodities, for our decadence. Oil is used in everything. It's not just to fuel your car. It's all of this plastic shit that we have all over us, in every aspect of our lives.
Well,
right?
Before it was dug out of the ground, it was pulled out of the seas, and
right.
Where we come from, that was a big whaling harbor and made makeup and whale blubber and all that stuff. It's just it's like you said, it's a cycle. It's crazy. I never put that together.
Pursuit. What it is we've talked about this several times.
Yes, this is
when you look at the cycle. So the sun is a primordial image within the Greco-Roman tradition, and we understand the sun through a series of deities. So the united, expanded sun at its absolute height is that Zeus. But when we're looking at the cycles, we understand it through the children and through the grandfather. So Dionysus represents the sun that goes into the underworld and then that is born in the fresh shoots of spring, the dying and rising god, right? And that magic of fertilizing the earth and the wildness of fertilizing the earth. But when you have this energy, it's that youthful wildness, right? We come into rebellion. We come into growth and expansion. We're in that unity of character. We support each other, but we don't build. Dionysus expands. He doesn't build. He engages in frivolity and love and lust, but that energy is not about refinement, right? This energy comes to upset the previous empires and bring in a new idea. It's punk rock, right? It's rock and roll by the black people in the 40s and the 50s before Elvis got a hold of it. It's that kind of wild sex, that wildness. Right?
Dionysus is a potato. Dionysus is a rhizome. Dionysus is what happens under the ground.
Yeah,
and what you get on what you get on the surface is only the tip of the iceberg. It just because you get a little Dionysus above the earth, you got to remember what's all going on underground. It's that rhizomatic. The only thing that can stop you is running into another little rhizome, and then what happens? You twist your little tails around and you become a super rhizome. It's that mixing, right? And then the Apollonian is the arborescent, right? It's the tree,
the sun in the sky.
It's the tree that's above the ground, where that's what you think is the laurel. Exactly. It's it's everything above the ground. It's the perfection. You can trim. You can't trim a rhizome, but you can trim a tree. You can
Well, what
prune
we
a
see
tree.
too,
You
also,
you
the
can
Apollonian, right? It's the essence of the Apollonian is refinement,
yes.
right? It's not a negative energy, right? It's an energy that is pursuing a perfected ideal, and it's about creating an ideal. But what happens as you get to the end of that refining cycle, right? It's the same thing with the Dionysian. Eventually that rebellion becomes stale, it becomes catatonic, it can't grow, right? It's always fighting, it leads to wildness, it leads to abuse, it needs refinement. The Apollonian naturally follows, and this is not necessarily a negative, right? This is a positive thing. But what happens is eventually you reach that height of that perfectionism, and then all that is left is calcification. All that is left is the remembrance of what came past, because now you've created these rigid dichotomies, these rules, these boxes for which things have to perform. The greatness is now a reflection. It's something to remember, that we've lost that previous inspiration. And that's when the Apollonian turns Saturnian, Chronosian, and
Yes.
it enters into that grandfather energy, where it's now about, instead of creating, it's about maintaining its already manifested power. It's about protecting and ensuring that its vision stays, and forcing the next generations to uphold its dying vision. So what do we need? We need that Dionysian wildness, right? Or sometimes it appears that Zeus, right, comes out and it slays, it castrates the grandfather, it casts him down into the earth, and then it engages in a new cycle, right? We've now brought up a freedom, we've now engaged a rebellion, and we're in that Dionysian again. But this seems to be how that sun, the cycles of the sun. And you see this like on full display in the festival rites, like in the Saturnalia, for example, right? In the Saturnalia, what you have at the beginning is you got that old god Saturn, and they have him bound up in chains. So what they do is they unbind him for this week of liminality, where he gets to experience, where everything gets upset and you get to see what can potentially come in the next coming year, right? And what do they do at the end of the Saturnalia? They sacrifice the grandfather. They burn up all these wax figurines, and then on the solstice, the child to come is born. Dionysus, Harpocrates, the new sun, and a new cycle sets forth, And so, like, this is such a primal kind of idea.
Yeah, and one of the things to remember is that what's happening and going on under the ground never stops, right? What happens above the ground has a finality to it. It stops eventually, right? It stops eventually. Whereas underground never stops. Something new is always happening, right? And we always have to remember that eventually something will erupt to the surface, right? Something will eventually make it to the surface. But you have to remember that all the stuff that's going on down there is what gives the possibility and gives the platform, gives the stage. It builds the stage that the Apollonian and eventually the Chronosian has to perform. But that is finite. That falls. Trees fall down. Buildings fall down. The foundations crack when they're exposed to the ground.
I always think about a really good way to look at the Apollonian is through examples of art. Art tends to reach a high pinnacle, and then it calcifies, and then it's no longer the creative spark and genius. It's not like it ceases to be relevant, but it no longer is evolving, and until someone can radically reshape it. So, like, for example, perfect example is to look at something like ballet or the theater. We can see how like ballet becomes this rigid, calcified form until you get someone like the guy who did the Rites of Spring, and then they shatter what it is to be ballet, and everything is different, and it's a wild Dionysian Stravinsky, wild Dionysian performance. or with theater, you get someone like Antonin Artaud, right, where he rejects the entirety of the classical theater model. He manifests the theater of cruelty. He breaks the fourth wall. He has people a part of his performance, and that shatters that ideal. Like these are Dionysian examples of slaying the Saturnian beast and revitalizing it, causing it a new life. What comes after is still related. It's the sun, right? It's the child of those previous images, so it bears some of that earlier idea, but it's also radically different, So like The Rites of Spring by Stravinsky looks nothing like a classical ballet, and yet it is.
Snappy, I wanted to answer a question that somebody had in the comments. They asked, what is the name of Skobie Wan's bonsai tree? And I wanted to let everybody know that the name is the Trianiscos.
The Trianiscos.
Yes, the little tree. The little tree.
He's the little dude.
It's the little tree. It's the little tree. The Trianiscos.
Well, somebody
it's
else.
a dwarf tree. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's a dwarf tree.
We had a comment that said that the roots of the bonsai is like what's the strongest point, and I had to. Yes. It's right there. I had to grab it. So
yeah, it's the Trianiscos.
It was my Christmas gift from my brother-in-law.
It's a perfect joke if you're, if you are one of.
Is that how you spell it?
If you have ears to hear, you understand why Trianiscos. And
you should talk a little bit about this, because
if you've read the book, then you understand why it's actually a perfect translation and perfectly Menippean, satirical, and biblically correct too. Also, I want to Snappy, do you remember what Dionysus did with the fig tree?
Oh my God! I don't want to. Why are you getting into the absolute gutter?
Well, because it comes up in the Bible, and it's one of those scenes that everybody goes, "Oh yeah, Jesus is Dionysus. That's super cool," and then he curses a fig tree, and I go, "Hey, guys, if he's kind of like Dionysus, what did Jesus do with that fig tree?"
Okay, so I got
everybody. Do you know what?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Do you know what Dionysus did with the fig tree?
He either rubbed his butt on it, or
you're pretty close.
The fig tree is it's another one of these Ruckian noticed like it's a play on words, and it's a sexual joke.
Oh,
it references someone who's blown out their butthole through too much sex.
Oh,
that's what it is.
Is this why vegans can't eat fig trees?
Dionysus cuts down a fig tree and crafts it into a dildo.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then, yes. And then,
right.
Yes.
This explains everything.
Jesus. There's also this nymph Psyche that Syke that he turns into a fig tree. There's a bunch of wild stuff.
That's why fig leaves cover genitals in art.
Yes,
could be.
Yes, because it's not that's not what they're covering. They are keeping the alabastrums inside. It is a support device. Like everybody, you don't need a bra. You know what I mean? You don't need one. So why were they using figs? Because they cut the tree down to make these alabastries, and then they had them inside and used the figs to hold them inside themselves.
Gross.
Yes, I mean,
to each their own. I'm just,
Yeah, there you go. That's more like it. Don't judge people.
I'm not.
It was a very, very long time ago in a very, very far away land.
Yum. I'm just,
You were kind of yucking.
I didn't mean to yuck a yum. I was just like, oh, okay.
don't yuck Dionysus's yum.
I wanted to answer this question for our friend here, D-Love. She says, do you think Dionysus wanted to be a savior or be saved or both? And it's like, okay, Dionysus is the dying and rising god, is Adonis, is Attis. It depends on what part of the cycle you're talking about. Dionysus goes up and down all around, right? This is the whole point. He's that force of generation who goes through the experience. It's not about being saved necessarily, unless he is caught in a certain part of the cycle. When he is that Dionysus upon the earth, right? In like the form of Attis. Attis is doing what? Attis wants to return to the divine feminine, So he's embodied in this masculine energy and this chthonic energy. And so in order to return to that divine feminine, remember, this is all metaphorical and also deeply human, right? So Addis goes through this path where he has to castrate himself through that process of the divine imitation to rise to the stars and become the great mother. But there's an understanding that by castrating himself, what is he doing? He is not only transitioning sex, but he's rejecting virility, rejecting greed, rejecting that lust, that eros magic that binds one into the earth, right? And being called to the stars. Now, this is not necessarily good or bad. This is not saying that rejecting of the earth is what you're supposed to do, because later on he falls to the earth in that pursuit of love and lust as Zagreus. Like, it's a cycle, right? He falls to the earth in pursuit of love and lust, and then he abandons love and lust and rises back up to the stars. And you can see the same process with the Kori. The Kori is ravished by the earth, and this is something that is still preserved in the Orphic hymns, right? She is ravished. It's not just an abduction. She is attracted. It is a violent abduction, but it's also an attraction. It's very much what happens to Zagreus, because they're parallel images. So Persephone falls into the earth, is abducted by Aidoneus, Hades, the hidden one, right? And in the underworld, she becomes the queen of the earth, and then she bursts into life in the spring, just like Dionysus, right? Mm-hmm. And then what happens to her? She becomes Medea, who goes through that cycle, who has to free herself from the Aphroditic magic of Jason. And then what does she do? She rejects her virility, conquers her animal self, and rises to the stars as that goddess Astraea. She sets herself ablaze, right? And then what does Virgil tell us? Virgil tells us in his Geographics or Georgics. Anyway, I can't remember. Virgil says it if you look it up. So, he tells us that Astraea will come back to the earth and bring about a new golden age of Saturn. What is this? This is beginning that Dionysian cycle again, anew, descending to the earth in that Bacchic wildness and bursting forth in the beauty of spring. It's the cycle of the seasons, from spring to winter, right? Rising to the heights of the stars is also dying. It's rejecting life. It's rejecting your virility for that purity of essence, but that purity of essence is not enough. And so you're called back down to the earth, because you are in that lust for the earth. But then that lust for the earth isn't enough. So you go back to the stars. And this is where we find ourselves. Welcome to real life.
Do you think it's an accident that Jason's an acronym for July, August, September, October, November?
Nothing is a coincidence, in my opinion.
That's a perfect
I don't believe it. I think everything is fated and determined. Yeah. And I believe in all of that kind of wild stuff.
I agree with you.
But... before I lose my thought, Snappy, could you pull up that question again real quick? Because I can provide my answer here real quick.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a little bit of a misconception about Dionysus, and I know why it persists. But let's take the question here from the end and work our way up. So do you think Dionysus wanted to be savior, to be saved, or both? So both? No. To be saved, Dionysus doesn't need to be saved, right? Dionysus is a god. Dionysus is the provider of the model of how to be saved, how to transcend, and how to progress, right? As well as, reflect upon what was provided for us previously and how to make our own path, right? Dionysus is the provider of the path to being saved, right? Dionysus isn't the savior or the saved, right? Dionysus doesn't need saved, right? Is Dionysus the savior? No, she is the savior, right? Hecate is the savior, right? Dionysus isn't the savior. Dionysus is the idol. It provides you the idol as a way of exactly. Dionysus provides you the model of how to transcend, right? Dionysus is the mediating force of how to get to being saved, right? Dionysus doesn't need to be saved.
But ultimately, right, it's all about Aphrodite, because whether if it's the stars, it's Aphrodite Urania, you're rising to imitate her. And if it's the earth, it's Aphrodite Pandemos, you're falling to be with her. But ultimately, both of those energies connect you to what? Again, that primordial cosmic energy, the chaos gap, right? The cosmic womb itself, right? And that takes us back into even more greater wildness, like the Orphic deities, like Chronos, time, and Ananke, necessity, which you talk about quite a bit. You love to use Ananke in your Towel of Minerva writings. You call the Towel of Minerva necessity. I always thought that was fun.
One of the interesting things about how we know that the Jesus story, the Gospel of Mark, and what we know is the Bible and all of that, is a parody and a satire and designed to mislead a certain audience that did not have ears to hear, is that Dionysus isn't the savior. Hecate is the savior, right? Hecate is the triformed savior. Jesus is presented as being a triformed savior.
He's an aspect, though. He's an aspect of the triform.
Exactly. So it's a misleading, because the Messiah does not come back, right? The Messiah leaves you hanging and goes, if you didn't make Demeter laugh, if you did not make my mother laugh, you're screwed. We'll see you next time, right? Good luck. Everybody who didn't make Demeter laugh again.
Like, if we're going to use Christian language, Hecate in this would be the Holy Ghost. Would be the Holy Ghost, and Mary would be God, and Jesus would be the Son.
So, here's the thing: is that so Hecate is Yahweh in this situation, because Yahweh means terrifying and Hecate means terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yahweh is a war god,
but also to a certain extent, so is Hecate, right?
She was.
There's the Hecate
to a point, right?
Right. It's more cosmic and time wars that Hecate's participating in it, and not.
I think what we're getting at is that the thing with Hecate is that you see her when she's in her form often as when I call her the Holy Ghost, it's because most often when people are engaging her, it's in that essence. She is the power of Artemis. She is the power of Apollo, Lucifer. She is that force of transition. She's in the liminal spaces. She's in the earth, the waters, and the air, right? It's that liminality. But she's also the united whole of the Trimorphos, which would be that ascended Godhead, the monad, Again, but we don't have a monad in the Greek tradition. We have the chaos womb, but it's the same. I mean, you do have the monad in the Greek tradition, but in this Hecatic tradition, you're going into that Orphic. I mean, the Orphic.
And that chaos. One of the interesting things about now that you mentioned Orpheus as well as chaos, which I associate with Eris, which would be the the polar of Harmonia. You have Discordia and Harmonia, Eris and Harmonia. You have those. They're two parts of the homunculus. And what Aristophanes told us about the two parts of the female homunculus, how that manifests itself in reality. It splits, right? So that you have Eris and you have Harmonia, they're sisters and they split. They're not sisters, they're soulmates, right? And depending on your perspective, right, if you are an Apollonian type, what you think is discord, is to a Dionysian is actually Harmonia, right? The wild is harmonious, but to an Apollonian, the city is harmonious, right? The city has that, right? So it's one of those things that the one pair of soulmates also has its opposite understanding to another pair of soulmates, right? So the Dionysian and Apollonian view the Harmonian and Discordian as opposites as well, right? Because they have that same perspective. right?
There's
So
also this understanding, right? Like Crowley talks about this. They talk about this in the Greek theology as well. But there's this understanding, okay, the zero, the chaos, okay, this understanding can never be perceived. It is hidden. It can't be heard. It cannot be seen. This is why the muse is hidden beyond the veil. And this is something that cannot be conceptualized in thought because it predates the birth of thought. It predates separation itself. Hence why they just call it the gap, right? It's that womb. And there can be no understanding of it. And so this is why Crowley always understands it as 0 equals 2. And this is why people talk about how as soon as the Greeks try to talk about chaos, they never talk about chaos. They always start talking about Chronos and Ananke, or they start talking about cosmogonic eros, because you cannot, try to talk about something that is the unitary all. You see the same problem in absolute monistic systems like in India, right? How can you talk about Brahman, the absolute, right? It predates, you cannot have thought, you cannot have difference. Our entire way of understanding our whole beings are founded in duality. And so it is literally beyond our comprehension to imagine something in a singularity. We can't. Language breaks
Snappy,
down.
for the sake of the audience, could you pull up that classic picture of the Aristophanic homunculus? The two people with the sides where you know what I mean, and the story, because Sketch the Cataclysm actually referenced it in the Towel of Minerva in one of the forwards. But Aristophanes, during Plato's Symposium, essentially said that human beings have their soulmate, and at the beginning of time, males and females, males and males, females and females, and anything in between with their opposites at one time were combined, and then split like the Orphic egg.
Well, I don't think Aristophanes was actually there.
I'm just telling you how the story goes, right? And it splits, right? Yeah. So that's how everybody has their soulmate, and that's how you have genders, and that's how you have non-genders, and that's how you have, all of the sexualities and stuff. The point of what Aristophanes was doing in that incident was to point out the absurdity of viewing things in binaries, because every pair of binaries has its own binary that it's reflecting upon, right? It has its own pair of eyes that it's looking at that same binary from. So, like I said, where
it's funny that eyes are also ones.
There you go. You see this? So
okay, yeah.
So this is what Aristophanes was trying to explain to us during the symposium, and that's how you have soulmates. And that's where they come from. So the desire is to connect, and if you're, if you are of the homosexual persuasion, that is because you were,
this is also a deep aspect of the mystery, because what do we see in the mystery? Dionysus in adoration of Venus, or Bacchus in adoration of Venus. You'll see this kind of a phrase, right? It's the buck-tick path that we see in the Greek and Roman world. But what is that really about? It's about that process of divine imitation of, what do? You got to marry the muse. You got to marry and imitate her, become like her, and proceed to the stars. But what is that really doing? That is, in the Orphic understanding, right? I am a being of starry heaven and also of the earth, right? You acknowledge that you're both, but my true nature is of the stars, So in the Orphic cosmogony, you're abandoning the earth and you're rising to the stars. It's just like we see in the Christian tradition. They break Orpheus, he's the beginning of that breaking of the cycle, where you highlight one singular path and you reject the other side. Now Dionysus doesn't rise in the earth, he just descends to the stars. But right, it's because they're rejecting that earthly self in the Orphic. But what that is showing us, though, is that there's this duality of self, and so much about the magical tradition is you got to marry your higher self, imitate them, your higher self, and draw them. They talk about this all the time. My channel used to be called this: draw down the stars, draw down the moon. What are you doing? You're bringing your truest self into your body, and you're uniting. You're becoming whole again. You're reforming this energy here. And this is how you become divine, right? And also it's about, you got to balance your conscious and your unconscious, your masculine and your feminine, your human and your animal, right? Everything is seen in that dichotomy of dualism, but that dualism breaks down when you become the magus. That's what Hermes does. Hermes beats the devil, rises to the stars, and becomes their united self.
And Hermes and Hecate are basically this sort of quasi homunculus.
Yep, they're two sides of this. They're
they're
both gods of magic.
Yes,
right?
two cheeks of the same butt.
Yep.
But
together they're Janus.
Yes, exactly. Now, one of the things the esoteric reading of the Argonauts, the Jason and Medea story, is that the tragedy of the entire story is that Medea was fated to be with Orpheus, not with Jason. Right? If you look at the way that those two work together as, two sides that are necessary for all of this to happen, it could not happen if they were not together. So the tragedy of it all is that they were fated the entire time and didn't, weren't able to be together unless it was for the purpose of magic for fucking Jason, and Jason sucks, right? Jason sucks throughout the entire goddamn story. Orpheus is awesome, and Medea is awesome.
Wait, so why is his name first?
What's that?
Why is his name first? Then?
Because the Greeks were patriarchal and they loved to go, look at our male hero.
But even the Greeks don't like Jason. A lot of people forget how the story ends. What happens to Jason? He's cursed to die alone in solitude, forgotten.
Wait, who opens the bag of wind?
I think I don't know who opens the bag of wind now.
Odysseus. I need to reread it. I haven't read it in a very long time.
I'm tired right now. That's in the Homer's Odyssey, and that's
I jumped stories. My bad.
I was thinking.
I went to the wrong story. My bad. No, I fucked that up. That's me.
Because I know Medea at one point controls the wind to blow the sails in the Argonauts.
Yeah,
but she doesn't open the bag.
I'm like a mythological pseudo archaeologist. I love to find like shit from one together. Yeah, so I just like to make shit up.
It's a group of dudes on a boat.
I was
the Odyssey and the Argonauts are the same.
Okay. I was just gonna say,
you sound like Amon Hillman.
I was just gonna say that thing that you brought up. The Greek one looks like Shiva behind Snappy's head, like it's got arms and legs. It's like, oh, I'm doing my best Jimmy Corsetti right now.
But the thing is that there's actually a legitimate academic way to do it, and then there's the approach that that we all participate in, where it's like the satirical approach. So and when you take the satirical approach, you can kind of understand, the everyday person's way of reacting to it and going like, yeah, the zealots are crazy, but also the people that don't get the joke are also crazy. Like, you're not getting the references that, the zealots aren't getting. So like, hey, let me show you in your culture, what they're not getting. Right. And that's what a satirist has done forever. They're the ones who come through and tie the loose knots and show you, what can be done when you go and, recognize the mixing, because
one way in which we can read the Jason and the Argonaut story, if we read it through this poetic mystical cycle of connecting to your highest muse, of overcoming your limits, of balancing yourself and having to get out of one mode and into another in order to come whole, you see Medea do this explicitly. What do I mean? At the beginning of the story, she is the perfect innocent child. She is so caught up in her innocence. The story begins with her parents. They're the kings of Libya, Aeetes and Hecate, and they kill anyone who comes on their shores. And they do horrible magic upon them, doing all these wild experiments, right?
From the perspective of the Greeks, it was horrible, wild experiments. But from their perspective... I'm sorry, I just wanted to chime in.
This is also how Medea saw it. This is also how child Medea saw it. Because the story begins with the child Medea rejecting her family, rejecting the violence. And she decides that she's going to do what? She's going to go to the coast and she's going to save the pirates. This is the act that damns her. That childlike innocence, right? Who lands on the shore? Jason. What does Jason immediately do? Curses her with the magic of Aphrodite, binds her to him. And then she gets caught up in this whole big thing. And the whole time throughout the story, She does all of this horrible, horrible, evil shit. But it's always at the behest of Jason. Jason says, look, your family's going to prevent us from leaving. How do we get out of here? Well, Medea goes, I can get us out of here. And she chops her brother up into 1,000 pieces and scatters his body throughout the waters. Now, they were able to get away because, according to their religion, the father had to go pick up all the pieces and bury his son, or else he'll never rest. So that occupies Aeetes, and they're able to escape. But Jason can't look at Medea now. She's this monster who ripped her brother up, but who asked her to save them? And she determined that that was what needed to be done, that was how they could get out of the dodge. And this is just one instance. There, again and again and again, all of these acts of violence and wild magic that Medea uses are at the behest of Jason, until finally, by the end of the story, she freaks out and asserts her dominance and burns the whole place down and gets the F out of Dodge. But the story doesn't end there for her. She goes to Athens and she tries to become the Empress of Athens. She's forced out of Athens and she travels back to Libya. She fights with her parents, reinstates her father as king, and then she travels across the desert until she hooks up with the Medes. She marries she winds up falling in love with one of these tribal people who has a son, and then she rises and becomes the emperor of the Medes. They changed their name to be after her. What do we see her doing? In a Greek sense, Medea becomes a man. She breaks free of that virginal innocence at the beginning of the story. By the end of the story, she is a warlord in charge of these steep people and a powerful emperor, So she is someone who's gone through that cycle, followed her muse, broken free of the chains of desire represented by Jason, and come into her true fulfillment and power by building the grand city, Babylon, right?
Yeah.
She's like Hatshepsut from the Egyptians.
I'm not too familiar with I've heard that name, but I'm not familiar with her story offhand.
It sounds similar, where she's like the queen. She's the first one of all these people. I'm really speaking real loose here. I was listening to some stuff, but it just, like, again, I'm making up my
you'll see
mythological.
this.
Okay. It's all these puzzle pieces.
Well, probably, why I say probably, I'd have to look into it, because we have two magical texts from the Muse tradition that are far later that just come out and tell you this in the Renaissance. So we have Boccaccio's The Illustrious Women, right? And what does Boccaccio do is he shows you all these empowered women across history, and then he says they're all the spirit of justice. They're all Medea. They're all Dike. They're all Estrella. They're all the Chori, right? And that energy, like Dionysus, dies and rises and reincarnates, comes again, or maybe she's inspiring them as a muse. It's not 100%, but this is what Boccaccio is telling us. And then if you go and you read The City of Ladies by Christine de Pizan, she does a similar thing. She connects all these women to being inspired by this muse force, being empowered, and she sets the record straight. She uses reason to break free of that demonation and to try and see the women in their true natural light. Even Boccaccio does this, but yeah. So there is a part of the tradition who sees this, who sees it that way. All of these empowered queens are connected to that same energy, right? I mean, they're the same and different. And we see this all throughout the Greek world. A really perfect example of this is something I've been studying and going crazy over. I've been really getting into the Roman tradition a lot. Specifically, I've been looking into the Kameni, which are the Roman muses. And the Roman muses are interesting. They're an indefinite number, usually 3 or 4. You have Egeria, Carmentis, Antivorta, and Portvorta. But these characters, it also deeply connects to this kind of like really esoteric tradition where that spirit of Egeria connects to Tacita, and Tacita is kind of like the Roman Hecate, right? Almost also like the Roman Lucifer in her story. Her story is wild. So it happens in Ovid's Fausti. And what it is that she is a nymph of the river Tiber, along with her sister Juturna. And Zeus comes down and he's like, I'm going to take any nymphs I want, and you guys have to submit. and he decides that he's going to go and take Juturna. And if anyone tries to stop him, he's going to, he doesn't care. This is what he's doing. So Tacita tries to get involved. She tries to stop this. So she goes to Hera and tells Hera what's happening, and she helps her sister hide. So for this, Jupiter freaks out, rips out her tongue, and then he says he casts her into the swamps of Later, of Latinum. But guess who takes her to the swamps? Hermes. And Hermes and Tacita make love and give birth to what? The twins, the Lares, Praestes, right? And then, so they're giving birth to the twins, the spirits. And this is the story, that's the original root of the foundation of Rome. It's older than the Romulus and Remus story. It's like, and this even parallels earlier stories with Saturn falling to Rome. Right. And then we get wilder story. We get another story too with this muse Carmentis coming from Arcadia and bringing her son, and then also founding Rome. And it's the same, giving birth to these twins. It's always these twins. Eventually it becomes that Roman myth of the prostitute who gives birth to Romulus and Remus and being raised by wolves. But that's all obscuring this older hidden kind of tradition that connects to this wild Hecadic stuff, right? And the goddess called Diana Nemorensis, right? The goddess of this place at this grove at Aricia. It gets really wild.
And the Hecatian tradition, as far as we have recordings of, even goes back to the Sumerians. They called her Gula. Gula. Right. Every single criteria. She was a triform goddess associated with dogs, medicine, plants.
So what I mean is like
witch and healing. This particular.
When you're looking in the Roman, though, when I'm looking at this character of the wolf mother, okay, she appears in so many. She is Tacita, she is Dia Muta, she is Dia Roma, she is Dia Bona, she is Acca Laurentia, Rhea Silvia, Egeria. Like these characters are the same and different. It's like, different incarnations, different aspects. They even have different temples, but yet they're united in the same mythic story, right? And you see similarities like in the Egyptian tradition. You look at that Mut character and Isis, and they largely get kind of conflated. Or you look at Sheshat the scribe and Thoth, and they kind of get conflated,
Or Bess and Priapus.
Right. In Greek.
What's the difference between Bess and Priapus? Somebody explain it to me, because I can't tell. It's
Well, but didn't at some point the Greeks?
Well, Bess is a lot uglier.
Priapus is the Greek. The adorable version of it, I guess, like the cute little Greek guy.
But didn't at some point the Greeks take over, or I don't know, colonize is the right word, but take over Egypt, right? And they ran Egypt for a while. So at some point where
they become the hegemon is what the word.
Okay, that's a cool word. I don't know what that means.
It's like America is the world hegemon at the moment and has been, since World War II.
Right.
Okay.
There was a period when Egypt was the hegemon of the world, at least
right. So but like, do you have a timeline of when these stories come out? Is that when these things are going on? Is this like
the stories
you know what I mean?
Start approximately 300,000 years ago.
Yeah, well,
they're just recorded around 6,000 years ago.
So I mean, the Egyptian traditions are the oldest,
right?
Yes. And the Babylonian, Now we definitely have older traditions, but this is before writing, right? Or if we did have writing, it's been lost. There's a lot of speculation about the various tepes, right? That would be all across Georgia and Turkey. It's hard to say what is going on in these tepes right now, because there hasn't been proper archaeological studies done there, because it's a crazy place right now in the geopolitical sense.
There's like 20 of them, I think. I was watching History with Kaylee, and they had a huge map of it's crazy. It is just absolutely.
And they've been excavating them for like 70 years now.
Right. 65.
The only reason that Göbekli Tepe was postponed until the 90s was because there was another one in like I think the 70s.
Yep.
It was it was going to be flooded by a dam that was being put in.
Oh,
so they were able to say like, okay, instead of doing Göbekli Tepe now, let's do this one,
right?
Because it's going to be damaged,
right?
You know, let's figure out the whatever needs to be preserved and all that. So they studied that one, and then in the 90s, but they knew about Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah. They knew about it since the 65.
Yeah, we got to just be, you know, it's really hard when we're dealing with this stuff too, because we got to be very careful. If you're going to, especially if you're going to pursue, I look at Göbekli Tepe, okay, and I remember a lot of people make a big deal because they have these pillars where you got these animal characters that seem to correspond to the zodiac. Right, and then there's this big question: is this
seem to right? Sorry,
right? And you know, is this just us jumping to conclusion, or is it the earliest version of the zodiac?
No,
we can't know right now. There's no, you know, maybe if you do a ton of archaeological evidence, you'll find some parallel. But unless you got some kind of parallel, you can't make that distinction. You know.
Yeah, you need a frame of reference to provide the context. Otherwise, you're literally just plucking it out of, you know, and that's what the archaeology does, you know. And one of the interesting things that the people early on that were studying Göbekli Tepe, or, you know, the tepes in that area, they were studying the domestication of wheat. I can't remember the name of the scientist, but he figured out that just using his hands and, you know, very like rudimentary tools, like, you know, a slightly sharpened knife, a slightly sharpened rock fabricated into a knife. He figured out that a family of 4 were able to harvest the wild wheat in this area enough to feed themselves for 1.5 years with only 1 week's worth of labor. Right, a family of 4, 1 week's worth of labor was able to feed themselves for 1.5 years. So that year and have extra. Right now, anybody who knows anthropology, if you've read Patai, and you know what happens with the extras that are left over, right? What can you do with those? You know,
you gotta deal with the waste, right?
You have a waste. You have this accursed share. What do you do with it? You can share it with your family, with your people. You can make beer. You can account for it. And, you know, press your luck early on, knowing, oh yeah, you know, I have this much and I can kind of play around and waste and yada yada yada. I can experiment, do whatever.
Build temples and give offerings.
You become a place where people visit and know, oh, at the end of the year before harvest, you have last year's crop. You can take some of that and go and colonize. You know, you can understand how all of these phenomenons of, you know, what we, you know, what
it seems like
anthropologically can manifest themselves, and it doesn't take like, you know, they were staring at the stars and, you know, being shamans and all of this. It's like, no, they were in the right place at the right time during the right climactic period with the right natural resources. This is the thing that, you know, the way that millet was you know, cultivated.
Well, I find it so interesting, you know, when we look at the earliest civilizations like the Tepes, or if you go to China or you go to Peru, what happens in all 3 of these places where cities start to emerge, or, you know, communities starts to emerge? Alcohol production. Alcohol production is the uniting force, whether it's wine or beer, or it is spit alcohol in China. They all are doing alcohol. And what we see in the Tepes, which is interesting, is that in the earliest archaeological record, people aren't really living there. They're coming there to ferment beer and grapes and to make various types of alcohol. And they're leaving their stuff there for long, long periods. Maybe there's a couple families who live there, but not too many people are living there, really. But then over time, this changes. You know, it stops becoming a gathering place where you come during the season to have a party, and it turns into a permanent settlement, you know?
Yeah, you know, you take that accursed share, that leftover, and instead of sharing it or sacrificing it or, you know, using it to better the community or to, you know, progress, to spread, you use it to control, right? And when you take that same Dionysian, you know, what is provided by the wild, and you have an extra, and then with that extraness you progress, the Apollonian tendency took over, which is very much a male-driven tendency, took over, and agriculture came about, right? So you took the biggest seeds, and those are the ones that you saved, right? And then the wheat got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you had your special big seeds, and those were yours. And if you shared some, then you had your little bit, but you had your big seeds, and you had your pride in your big seeds, right? Where everybody knows, if they know me, the original reason for the cultivation of wheat wasn't for the seeds, it was for the ergot that grew on the seeds, right? And the tendency to take some of what is provided by nature and to bring it back to your dwelling was more of what we know as gardening and horticulture, not agriculture, right? It was for the purpose of medicine, not for the purpose of food, right?
Right.
And the way that you can understand, if we use the word progress, the way that we can understand the progress that led to the domestication was the selection of the medicinal and bringing it back to your dwelling. That is what made the seeds get bigger and bigger and bigger over time, because there was a selection pressure, and the common characteristic amongst those particular seeds,
because they were harder to fall off naturally, right?
Yes,
So
all of these
around
things
longer.
exactly. So because you were selecting for the seeds that had the fungus, you had the natural inclination for shattering, right? So that became easier, right? Because the seeds got bigger, and the bigger the seeds, the bigger the potential fungus, right?
There's also,
So
we got to talk about a lot of this kind of pre-agriculture stuff too, because agriculture really does come with alcohol and the need to build buildings for production of producing something that requires a lot. We do see smaller settlements and industry all around things like the production of pemmican. One of the wildest things that I read about is the Neanderthals had pemmican factories where they were processing collagen from animal fat, combining it with seeds, and making trail mix bars, making pemmican bars. This is like way before people are even on the bloody scene. But that doesn't lead to the construction of what would become, towns and cities. It's not until we get to alcohol do we see that. And we do have like all across native of North America, for example, a lot of modern archaeology is starting to recognize this. Like one of the wild things where I'm at is all of the woods around me are, they still maintain a lot of this, but they were purposefully planted forests by the indigenous community. Every season, there's tons of food. And you can find and survive in these woods if you know what you're looking for, because they have been cultivated and not designed in the way of agriculture, but more designed than not designed, because the natives would go around and they would spread seeds and they would keep going back to the same places and would spread seeds. And you do this over 1,000 years. You've shaped that entire ecosystem, and it stays this way even long after their direct involvement is no longer around.
Yeah, they were expansive wild gardens, and anybody who gardens and or has large spaces knows that, like, it's basically a microcosm of like a small garden, right? Where your water sources are, where your shady spots are, where your hot spots, this place gets cold, yada yada yada. When you're working in a garden, you know how to cultivate your space, and when you get good at that, you can go to the wild and start cultivating it. Ergot on wheat, never seen it.
You studied this, Mandy. You actually purposely inoculated wheat with ergot.
Yeah.
Is this person making this is very poetic. Is this person making a joke?
Well, so here's the thing.
No, I just think they're not as familiar with ergot.
Oh, okay.
Well, so
I think it's an honest question.
Rye is a type of wheat, right? Wheat is a shorthand. It doesn't necessarily just mean wheat like what we make bread flour out of, right? That would be like bread wheat, right? That you would take and add an adjective in front of that, right? If you're just talking about the grass, the wheat family of grasses, rye is in that, as well as like oats and stuff, right? So when we're talking about and barley, well, we have triticale and spelt and all of those things. It would be like saying using broccoli as a shorthand for brassica,
Mhm.
right? More people are familiar with the name for broccoli. So if you say like, it's a cauliflower is a white broccoli, right? Everybody's familiar with broccoli, but they might not necessarily be familiar with cauliflower, right?
Right.
Or kale
They're
is a
related,
leaf.
yeah.
Kale is like a leafy broccoli, right? It's the same thing, but it's the
Yes.
leaf, right?
Right.
And you have but botanically, wheat is kind of the grass family that.
But we
all
also,
that
I just want to talk about how wild this stuff gets to with wheat, because
Right.
we've talked about this a lot, but one of the foundational texts of the German language, and that has been studied to death, and one of the oldest laws in Europe is the Germanic beer purity laws, which was a Protestant effort to stop a lot of this mystery, right? But it was also, it's a dual thing, because ergot poisoning, we believe, this is the most common it's hard to know what these medicines they were using, but ergot is one of the most cited possibilities for the psychedelic stuff that would be used at Eleusis and in various Greek rites. It's hard to say, what they were actually using, but we do know that if you get ergot poisoning, you will hallucinate. But more often, you will go and die. People would have necrosis of the flesh. They would have wild types of seizures. It was really, really erratic and hard to manage for. And so this is where Mandy's theory comes in, where he believes that in the ancient world, they were cultivating specifically for certain types of ergot, like the same way we cultivate modern mushrooms or any other kind of medicinal plant. But under these Christian puritanical laws, which began with a good purpose, right? We want to protect people and not get them sick. But there was also about wiping out these more ancient cultivars, the ones that were purposely developed to produce ergot, right?
Yeah. I like to say that, Protestantism, Catholicism, the monotheism, just the agricultural tendency in general, which I associate with Apollonianism. It's about that perfecting the amber waves of grain, right? Whereas the Dionysian,
it's that Apollonian refinement, right?
Yes, yes,
pure beer, the perfect clean.
Yes, it's the admiration for the amber waves of grain, right? Whereas the Dionysian, when
embraces
you're looking at
diversity.
what the Dionysian admires and wants to cultivate is the small patches of purple, right? The purple patches.
Mhm.
And if you know your satire, go ahead and Google the word purple patches and then go, oh, wow, that Mandy guy really, really knows his shit. He sat on this purple patch thing for an hour and a half. I sat on it. Yeah. Yeah. I worked that into. That's a written joke. I wrote purple patches as a reference to a satire from a very, 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 very long time ago to explain the cultivation of wheat and how it was originally used for ergot instead of the grain. And I said amber waves of grain, and the Dionysian and the Satyrian and the satirist and the medicinal, they prefer purple patches. That's such a sophisticated joke.
Well,
I just want to throw that out.
No one's gonna
you're not gonna get it. You're not.
The other part of it, right? Like purple patches is a poetic phrase to describe a certain type of flowery language or a passage in a text.
I did not know that.
Did you know that that's what the
word
purple patches mean?
I did not know that.
Yes.
No.
So this whole thing about the burning purple, right?
There are no coincidences.
Purple patches, right? And you go, this
mystical point of your literature is called the purple patch. What is going on here, Skobie?
Right? Like purple patches is one of those things that, like, I hope everybody can walk away from this, an hour and a half into this conversation, knowing, hey, purple patches is a thing. And like I just now found out about that, and I'm however many years old, and I've been reading this Greek stuff forever. And it took this silly farmer to do this Ruckian satire to make the connection between amber waves of grain and purple patches. Right, that is necromancy at its finest. And I want to revel in what the muse provided. You know what I mean?
You know that
beautiful.
Apollonian Puritanism has no room for the purple patches.
The
The
purple
purple patches are nonsense. They must be
Yes.
extricated, right? They cannot exist. Our beer can only have 4 ingredients. you know?
Yes, the purple patches is the proletariat, you know, and if you've read your Karl Marx, you know
There we go.
that is how the uprisings, and you know, it always comes from the bottom up, the uprisings, right? The purple patches and the proletariat, the purple proletariat, the proletariat porphyra, we're coining
Porphyria.
phrases. Porphyria, the
Well,
proletarian
that's-
porphyria, the purple proletariat, Johnny.
I remember it as potpourri, so
Well, there you go. So, and also everybody, so that we can really make this whole thing come full circle, like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail,
Yeah.
because obviously you see
Human
the
centipede.
groove here. We're preaching, Johnny.
You're preaching. I'm the scribe.
All right. So the Murex. Who discovered the Murex?
The dogs of
Who
Heracles.
discovered the It was Cerberus who discovered the Murex.
I thought it was
And
Lucian.
what happened to Cerberus's lips?
The foam.
Stained them purple.
Right.
Cerberus
And then he started
had
foaming, right?
purple lips, and they started foaming, and the spume,
Oh, the spume.
Hit
That's
the
what that's called,
ground.
Yeah.
the foam hit the ground, and what arose from the foam of the ground?
Kale.
Kale Satan. Kale Satan, Johnny. Kale Satan.
I was just gonna go to kale chips because they look like dinosaur skin, you know.
We'll edit that one out. Kale Satan. No, but for real, Snappy, what came out of that?
I'm
spume?
trying to remember
The
what you're
purple
referencing
spume?
here.
The purple spume that came
Yeah.
out.
I
It's
know,
in
like,
Hecate's
okay,
garden.
it's aconite. That's what it is, right? The
Aconite,
wolfsbane.
wolfsbane.
Wolfsbane. That's it.
Yes.
Wolfsbane. Yeah,
Wolfsbane,
Heracles.
which is what was used
I was trying to give you time.
Christ the arrows in the
Oh.
first scene.
Right.
Oh, that's how you
Right.
poison people.
That was what. So what ultimately the trials of Hercules, right? Was a Ouroboros Hecatean prank on to make Hercules go into the underworld, bring Cerberus up,
Right. Smacks him on the head.
so that the spume could come to the ground and the aconite could be released,
Oh, cool.
which makes the poison,
Yep.
which takes and keeps making
And it's
a
called
circle.
the dart. Aconite is called
Yes.
the dart. You know,
Yes. Yes.
it's so deeply connected to this Hecatic Artemis magic, you know, the far shooting.
Mm.
Yes. So, you know, without the Hecatean, without Hecate doing a satire on Hercules, you would not have the dart poison that, you know, all of the Amoniskos get so worked up about. You would also not have the purple that the Amoniskos get so worked up about, right? Like, and you can't see this if you are an Amoniskos. You have to be a Ruckian to see this, because Ruck tells us in no uncertain terms, Hecate is Cerberus,
Hmm.
and Jesus is Balbo's son.
Which is go on. I know. I need one more tree. I almost got it. It's in my head.
Balbo is Hecate again, but
Oh.
okay, all right.
Oh, okay.
So in the story of in the story of Demeter, what happens after the Corey becomes abducted? She comes down to earth in a maddened rage, and she starts running around crying, and she's traversing the whole earth. And eventually she comes to Greece, and she bumps into Balbo and to these other Greeks. And they try to get her to calm down and to come eat with them and to take hospitality, because, you know, this is the greatest in the Greek tradition, that was always to love your neighbor as you love yourself. You know,
Well, that
like the
sounds
most
familiar.
Jesus phrase in the
Yep.
world is really the most Dionysian phrase in the world. You got to love the everyman, because Dionysus is the everyman, right? He is all of us. Anyway, so they have that thing where you got to take in strangers and help them. So they take in Hecate and they help her, but she's in this mad rage where she won't stop crying. So Balbo looks over at Hecate and lifts up her dress and
Whoa.
flashes her vulva at her. And in that moment, Hecate bursts out laughing. Bursts out laughing. You know, sometimes it's actually, I can't remember the name, but there's another version where she tells her a joke, but it's either a joke or a flash.
Is she still a Titan at this point?
Well, so here's the thing: is that
you meet her? Yeah, she's still a Titan.
Okay.
Yeah.
The way that it's described when it says that she tells a joke is it's actually a description that is more akin to the Ace Ventura using your butt to talk.
Butt to talk.
Because that's what's going on. Like she lifts Balbo lifts her dress. And also sometimes it can be interpreted as, you know, the baby that's inside her is talking. Right.
The baby also like grabs her boob at one point in some of the stories.
Exactly. Yeah, like the baby reaches out, right? So
out of her.
Yeah.
No. Balbo's holding her baby.
Oh, no. But sometimes Balbo is pregnant, so the baby is inside her. So when she uses her vulva to talk, it's giving voice to the baby, the divine child inside, right? So it's giving voice to Dionysus, to the baby Dionysus, which then makes Demeter laugh, and because you made Demeter laugh, she goes into the underworld, right? And everybody knows the classic quote from Heraclitus if they have read their infallible Hillman, the one and only James Hillman. He has his book Dreams in the Underworld, where he explains that one of the passwords to the underworld is Boroboros, which is Greek for shit, which
eating
is
of the filth. That's Hecate as the eater of the dirt.
Exactly, right. So
that's a very skateboard word.
Yeah,
eating shit, huh?
Eating shit. Yeah, there you go. So that's an epithet for Hecate, right? So when you really go for it and eat shit, yeah, you bust your ass trying to skate in the streets and be a cynic, a Dionysian cynic, skating in the streets, having no respect for your surroundings, grinding up that curb, and you eat shit because you fell and you went for it. That is Hecatean. Right? We still use the same terminology, right?
I know, it's fucking crazy.
One of the passwords to go into the underworld is to try to fucking tray flip El Toro, bust your ass and eat shit, right? Okay. That's how you get into the underworld, right? It's the same thing the Greeks are doing, taking a leap of faith and eating shit, right?
Yep.
It holds its same connotation, but it also can sometimes literally mean doing a G.G. Allen and eating shit and painting yourself and Christing yourself with shit. So shit Christing also means G.G. Allen, which gets us back to what we watched when we started here, you know, with the Bacchic, the Dionysus.
A lot of people freak out over that stuff, but you see that kind of stuff in every one of these mystical cults. Not everyone, but any of these, it comes out all the time in religion and George Bataille talks about this in his Accursed Share. Right? If you want to experience the all, if you want to experience reality unclouded, you have to break down all law, all false conceptions. You have to challenge taboo. You have to, it's one thing to say that I'm not bound down by, these things that are placed upon me. It's another thing to eat shit or to rip a baby apart or to commit the ultimate of sins. What is the ultimate sin in your culture? What is the ultimate way? And you see this still in the you got to die, you got to set yourself ablaze, you literally have to, a willful death, you got to castrate yourself, in order to have that profound mystical experience. There has to be that shattering of the ego in the presence of the all. And this is where it gets wild. You can do it with the drugs, you can do it with sex, or you can do it through that breaking of the taboo, right? In all of its horror. And this is where you get all that weird sex stuff. You get all that, you also see, you see all of this stuff across these kind of tantric, Gnostic, occulted traditions. The eating of semen, the eating of shit, the eating of menses, right? The eating of animal products. If you're in a culture where that animal products are taboo, right? But it's always going to those literal extremes. And this is why it's so wild. I look at something like the Christian tradition. When you create a devil and you imagine a rite, now you have created the ultimate taboo and you've given these people a method for shattering the all. So you've ensured that those rites are going to be performed. You've ensured that there's going to be creation. Satan's Christians and their absurdity manifest Satanists and their absurdity. You know, they wind up coming together because now you've created a taboo and a fear. You have this whole image of the black satanic mass. Well, now it has to happen. Now you've ensured that it will happen. And we saw it occur, right? It happened in France, where you got that mafia boss, Lavoisin. Did I ever tell you about Lavoisin, Mandy? So Lavoisin is one of the interesting, or Voisin, Voisin. She was a mafia boss. Let me just look her up here. What was
what time period?
What age was she in?
Yeah,
here we go. So she was in 1640 to 1680. Okay.
1640 is like okay.
Yeah, she was called Lavoisin.
Beginning of the Renaissance.
Yep, beginning of the Renaissance, and her whole thing was she began as a fortune teller who then developed a mafia organization of fortune tellers.
Oh, I love her.
And then it evolved into sort of a blackmail ring for the elite. So she would be offering fortunes and offering, you know, things for the elite. And then she would get dirt on them, and she created sort of a blackmail thing. But it also started to become a service to provide, you know, underhanded services for the elite. So she started to do things like give abortions, you know. Wow. Well, then what did the elite want? The elite want power. They want money. They want magic. And in their Christian society, the way to get power is to do these horrific math, to do these horrific rites, to summon the devil. Now, Lavoisin saw an opportunity. She's already exploiting these people's wild superstitions through these, you know, these selling of various magics and poisons and fortune telling. She found an opportunity. She was like, if I do a fake black mass and we put it on for these people and we make them believe that they're engaging in this horrific thing, they'll pay me a shit ton of money and they'll think that they have real power.
Like a theater?
Like a theater, but it's also, it's not just theater. It's partially real.
Okay.
She went and got a priest. She went and got prostitutes. She has the priest have sex with prostitutes. She takes these aborted fetuses that she has and she sacrifices them and rips them apart on stage, right? So yeah, it's a performance, but they're also doing this debaucherous shit, you know? And this is all on full display, right? And this is happening in the underground in Paris, right? And eventually...
Does she have any connection to the Rosicrucians? Because for some reason, I feel like I have.
Yes, well, you know, a lot of people connect her to Gilles de Rais. You know, that's where in France a lot of the satanic stuff seems to come from him. Okay. You know, I'm not too certain about the Rosicrucian connection, but it's, you know, the Rosicrucians are all over the place and are so obscure, right?
Right.
It's hard to know where the satire ends and the reality begins.
That was sort of because it's like, you know, a lot of this is like them fabricating the tale of what, you know, for the sake of, and it sounds very much like that Rosicrucian style of like, you know, spin a story about one of your members that's so disgusting that, you know, it scares off everybody. You know what I mean? Because then, like, if you actually, you know, what that does to your audience, that sort of satire, and I'm assuming that there's a form of satire going on here by what you're describing, because I feel like I can't picture in my mind how the name is spelled because it's French, so I might know the name, but I've never heard it said, so my brain's not working.
Voisin.
My brain's not working. My brain's not working in French. And I have this thing about not letting my brain work in French because then my brain starts working in French, and that's not good. I don't want that to happen to me, and I don't want that to happen to anybody else. Don't let your brain think in French. Always use a French lexicon. Because, you know, the funny thing about French is that you have to translate French into French, and depending on the French that you start with, your French is Frenchy in different ways. So, you know, just if you're not French, just don't try to French. So
no, satire does not require an intent.
Not at all. Satire does not acquire intent at all.
It just requires subversion.
Yeah,
that's all it requires.
And subversion doesn't really require intent. Subversion requires context. So you can just, you can subvert something that you didn't intend to subvert.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You can be using
That's all I ever do, actually.
And
I mean, when we're looking at the earliest forms of satire, right? When we're looking at the original satire that comes out of the cult of Demeter that's cast by the priests, what is it about? It is about shaming someone, ruining their life, about making them a mockery and exposing their hypocrisy so that no one will like them anymore. And these things were so dangerous, it was said to like live on after your death. It would ruin not just your life, but your family's life, you know? So that is the heaviness of satire, right? Medea had a satire cast upon her. We still talk about how she killed her children, but in the earliest versions of the myth, she did not do this, right? She burned up Corinth, got the heck out of a Dodge, and then the Corinthians killed her kids. And there is evidence to say, this comes from the Scholalia of John Tzetzes, okay? And he's writing about Euripides' Medea play. Euripides was paid off by these people to rewrite the story because they were tired of being vilified for being blamed for murdering Medea's children. So they cast a satire upon her, you know? So satire can happen like that too, right? It's political propaganda, right? It's designed to assassinate a person's character or to assassinate an idea or an ideology or a political framework, but it's all about ruining something, exposing its hypocrisy, you know, flipping it on its head and making it stupid, taking something that's powerful and reducing it, emasculating it, right? But
that's really it's about unraveling and then re-raveling to make whatever it was that you unraveled your own, and to re-ravel it with anything else that you choose to ravel it with, right? The satire is it has a triple etymology. One of the obvious ones comes from satyrs. The satyr plays; those were satires, right?
The mixed plate, cutting things up
exactly.
on the plate.
So that's one of them. Is the mixed plate? That's one of the etymologies of it. And then you have the satura, right? The STR root, which is that satanic, reveling in the chaos, right? So the triple etymology in its nature is Hecatean, right? It has all of the forms of Hecate, right? It also comes out of the iambs, right? Which is part of that satanic.
Babo's name is also Iambi, right?
Exactly. The iambs were insult poetry, right? And that all of that in its entirety is satire. So when you're saying
about that tradition, remember it was kind of like the Dirty Dozens, the ancient
exactly,
Greeks
version
of the Dirty Dozens.
At the end of Aristophanes' Frogs, you have the two poets battling, right? That's and Dionysus is the referee of the battle, right? That was like the entire reason he went down there to see who the best poet was, right? That itself
is it Aeschylus? Is it Euripides?
Right, and he makes the two of them battle poetry line by line by line.
What was the slave's name again?
Xanthias.
Xanthias.
Yeah.
He breaks the fourth wall. He's my favorite character.
Well, Xanthias is the main character in Frogs. Everybody knows that.
Right.
I say that as though everybody actually
knows that.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, he's the Deadpool of the ancient Greeks.
Exactly. Xanthias is the Deadpool of Frogs. So that's how you're supposed to look at it. People think that Dionysus is Deadpool. He's like, no. Xanthias is your Deadpool character in Frogs. Like Xanthias is breaking the wall. Xanthias is like
what's wild about Dionysus in Frogs is that he doesn't break the wall.
He doesn't.
He's in the underworld, and the Greeks would have understood that he is the god of the he's the sun in the underworld. And yet he's the one who gets his ass fucking beat, and people mistake him for Heracles, right? Yeah. He's letting his slave run mental tricks around him. Like you're the fucking god. What's going on here?
He makes himself the buffoon because that's what's necessary for it's about the ego death, right? Make yourself a buffoon, and it's a Dionysian ego death that we're witnessing. And Xanthias is, you know, that character that's breaking the fourth wall, and it's almost like a pseudo chorus is the way you're supposed to understand Xanthias in that play as far as the stage goes, because the chorus breaks the wall. The chorus is like in the crowd and stuff, right? Whereas Xanthias is this character that's on the edge of the stage or up top over here, or like walking and stuff, and like literally trades costumes with Dionysus and stuff at one point. And one of the really fun little things about it that connects to the book is every single time Dionysus shits his pants in frogs, it is because of the mention of Cerberus, or the allusion to Cerberus, right? And one of the fun things about Greek comedy is that, you know, they knew that Hecate was Cerberus, right? But they don't ever really come out and say it, right? So, you know, there's all this times where Dionysus explicitly craps his pants because Cerberus, and then there's this other one where there's an offstage monster, right? So the crowd doesn't see the monster. No one ever sees the monster. It's Xanthias playing a prank on Dionysus.
Oh, that's good.
Knowing that the trigger for Dionysus pooping his pants is Cerberus, right? So he goes.
That's a long play. How many times can he poop his pants?
They're all only an hour, but yeah, the actor like literally
that's a lot of poop, man.
3 times, because that's, you know, comedy comes in three times during the play.
I thought it was 4.
It's 3. 3 times during the play at the mention of Cerberus, and this one is an allusion to Cerberus off stage, right? So one of the things that everybody knows about Hecate, and the Greeks know about Hecate, is that she a spuma is one of her daimons, where she can cast a spuma, which is like a shape-shifting deity, and can take any form, you know, that she wants, right? Did I say that right? No, it's a spuma the horse. Oh no, why is my brain blanking?
The horse?
Yeah, because I'm also mixing it up with the horse that was in.
I found this. I wanted to read this.
That was in.
I think Snappy's
Zelda.
gonna.
Sorry, Zelda.
So I was looking for something I wanted to read for you about
a puma?
the pooping of the pants. So this is. I remember the first time I read Aristophanes' Frogs. I'm like, what is with the pooping of the pants? Why does he just take a dump in the middle of the floor? What is going on here? Right? You know, it's a weird thing. You know, so I looked it up, and I found the quote. It's from Diogenes Laertes, The Lives of Philosophers, Book 6, Chapter 46. Okay, it says Diogenes' sense of shamelessness is best seen in the context of cynicism in general, specifically though it seems from a reposition. Or sorry, this is talking about Diogenes imitating Dionysus.
Right.
Okay. So his sense of shamelessness is best seen in the Greek context of cynicism, specifically though it stems from a repositioning of convention below nature and reason. One guiding principle is that if an act is not shameful in private, that same act is not made shameful by being performed in public, right? Anyway, it's just some wild shit.
Sounds like a dog.
You would say are so nearly mad that a finger makes all the difference. For if you go along with your middle finger stretched out, someone will think you mad, but if it's a little finger, he will not make you think you're so. So what he's trying to say is that the pooping, both with Diogenes and with Dionysus, is about embracing the divine madness. And it's about taking the madness to its illogical extremes. And it's about, you know, just as we were talking about with the left-handed path, right? The eating of the feces is about shattering the taboo. The pooping of yourself is also the shattering of taboo, right? And the God doing it, it shows you that all of this stuff is stupid. And why do you even care? And it's like to laugh at yourself and to break down all this kind of meaning, right?
Yeah, now my brain, I still can't remember what the name of the shape-shifting god, the deity in the underworld that Hecate sends. And he says like it's like a donkey with like a brass leg. She forms into a pile of dung, and then a dog. And then when Xanthias says, and now it's a dog, right? Hecate's dog in the underworld, the only dog.
You're talking about Empusa.
There you go. Yes. Empusa. Because I wanted to say the name of the horse from Zelda, and I knew that was wrong.
Empusa.
Yeah.
Never heard that word in my life.
Yeah, Empusa. Shapeshifting.
The demonic phantom.
Yeah,
Well, there's
yeah.
a Greek mythology book
One-legged,
right next to
having a
you.
brass leg and a donkey's leg.
Yeah.
Wow, really?
So control and it's
Donkey-footed.
yep, donkey-footed. So and
Donkey-footed.
it's a daimon of Hecate. So Hecate
You
like
would
sends,
you read frogs though, so you know, and you remember when Empusa shows up in front of Dionysus and Xanthias on their way to the underworld.
this is
right?
happening. So this is
To
happening
scare
off.
them.
Exactly. So I was describing
Yeah.
this is actually happening off stage. So it's a prank that Xanthias is playing on Dionysus. So the crowd doesn't see it, and Dionysus doesn't see it because it's dark, right? And
Right.
everybody in the underworld. Here's one of those things that if you've read your Heraclitus and you've read your infallible Hillman, and then everybody would know about Heraclitus is that James Hillman tells us that Heraclitus said that souls in the underworld perceive via smell. Right, so you're smelling. That's how you guide yourself in the underworld, right? So part of what would be happening is when Dionysus poops his pants, is that it's almost like a Gallagher kind of thing.
Yeah,
where like the crowd is getting sprayed with.
Oh, gross.
You know, and what's wild is with this Empusa thing too is that they say that Empusa is either sometimes they say is Hecate or sometimes they say is a demonic energy of Hecate in the same way they talk about Cerberus, right?
Exactly.
Where often a Cerberus is a male dog, but it's seen as a servant or an embodied energy of Hecate, right?
Exactly. So
Empusa is also this.
And which can lead us to understand is that sometimes the interactions that we see with Cerberus, was it actually Cerberus or was it Empusa?
Does Empusa have a horn on its head?
Empusa can take any form.
No, so Empusa is a unicorn. Love it.
Yes. So that's sort of part of it, and that's one of the things that we need to remember when we're seeing and reimagining these catabasis stories is that sometimes it's not an authentic catabasis because it's like a practice catabasis, right? Where
like taking a nap.
That's actually exactly what I was getting at, Johnny. It's perfect because the realm of sleep is the realm of Hecate. Right, the realm of death is the realm of Cerberus. Right, that is when you're doing an authentic catabasis. Now there is what we can understand as the Empusan catabasis, where the Cerberus is a faux Cerberus. It's a practice Cerberus, right, where it's actually Hecate in your sleep using Empusa as a faux Cerberus. So you were only asleep practicing, right? Now the how we have that idea of pinching yourself to know if you're asleep or you're awake.
Oh yeah.
Right. The Greeks had that same thing. Did you do the catabasis or were you just sleeping?
Yeah.
Did
you see
Cerberus?
Yeah.
Right. However, okay.
However, Empusa,
you cannot see Cerberus.
Right.
You can only smell Cerberus. You are
Right.
only
You can
guiding
hear him.
yourself. No, not in the underworld.
He growls. Yeah.
But that's only this is why what I'm getting at is that these catabasis stories were not actually according to the Greeks' understanding of the metaphysics and symbology of these stories, is that they were practice catabasis. And recreations on the stage, where the authentic catabasis is a Cerberesian catabasis where you are guided by your nose, the way of the dog.
Yep.
It is
gnosis.
Yes, it is the same thing that the Egyptians, the same reason that the guide for the underworld was a dog.
Yeah.
Anubis, the same reason why
Anubis is a dog.
Yes, Anubis is dog-headed and a deaf dog. And also you have the deaf dogs of the South Americans, right? So the South, in Southern America, they believe that, when you die, you are guided to the underworld by all of the dogs that you were nice to in your life.
Sweet.
And if you were not nice to dogs, you're fucked.
That explains a lot.
That's because you lose your entire sense of of being that you rely on for logos, right? Most of human reliance on the logos is your eyes and your ears. The least logotic sense that we have is our olfactory. And that is the only one that we are left with in the underworld. So it's you become purely atomized, and you are experiencing the olfactory. So your sense of touch, your sense of hearing, your sense of seeing, all of it atomizes in the Greek sense of the atomist into what we understand of as ether, right? You become ether and atomize, and the etheric sense of the underworld, the way to catabasize and come out of the etheric and re-atomize into a reborn being on the other side of the catabasis, is to understand how to guide yourself via olfaction to the other side. You can only practice the catabasis while sleeping, right? And if you see Cerberus, or you hear Cerberus, or you feel Cerberus, right? That is as authentic of a catabasis as that feeling when you are dreaming and then you stand in front of the toilet and you're just about to pee and you wake yourself up and you go, oh my God, I almost peed the bed, right?
That happens all the time.
Yeah, right. This is what the catabasis of most of these patriarchal catabasis stories are, right? Right. They are faux catabasis. They're not authentic catabasis. You have to truly experience the ionic, where you lose.
Well, this is what people speculate, right? Like the earliest rites were like, for example, if you look at like the story, this is from the Norse, but if you look at like the goddess Hel, right? What is her story? Right? Loki takes her and puts her half into a river and leaves her there, where half of her body dies. And then he gives her a potion and she comes back to life, but only half of her comes back to life. And she's said to be the goddess of the dead and be able to traverse into the death because she died. And she literally lost half of herself. She had to go through that near death experience, right? And a lot of that was what you were doing with these drugs. It was supposed to simulate death. You had to, like Mandy says, you got to die before you die so that when you die, you don't die.
Exactly. I'm
Right?
glad you said it for me. That's a perfect way of doing it. And if you understand the Heraclean way of perceiving in death, you have to remember, don't drink from the first river. That's fucking child's play. Like everybody knows you don't drink from the first river. Don't drink from the first river.
What is that?
That's the river forgetfulness. What it is like you're caught up in this. When you die, you're going to be in this extreme pain and extreme thirst, and the first thing you're going to see is the river. And if you go and satisfy yourself with the river, you will immediately forget what's going on and get washed away and fall back into creation.
Gotcha.
You want to cross the river and continue on to the well of memory, and you drink from the well of memory, right?
Yes.
Mnemosyne, the mother of muses.
Yes. Now, so what is being described in this situation, right? You have to remember that you are not seeing the first river, right? You are perceiving it olfactory, right? You have to be able to smell the difference between, that first river, because if you get sucked into the river Lethe, right, you end up not being able to atomize yourself you can't remember how to atomize yourself because you haven't crossed paths with memory, right? When when like you smell something and it can take you back into
nostalgia.
Well, it's not exactly nostalgia. Nostalgia is like the feeling that you get when you see like something. Nostalgia is a visual thing. Olfactory, that's ingrained in your soul. Okay, that is what you carry with you to guide you olfactorily through the underworld to the other side.
Got it.
Right? Okay. to be able to remember is to be disciplined enough not to get deatomized into the river Lethe, right? Because then you forget and you are forgotten, right? Now you can cross if you understand that, and you can go into the memory river and become atomized through the memory river, right? Which is all the little bits of raspberry, all the little bits of raspberry that are floating around in the Milky Way. They become reatomized into the cosmic raspberry, and then you then have the potential to be relogodized, right? So you have to ego death, not cross the first river.
It's very complicated.
And then logo death, right? By memory. And it's the responsibility of necromancers to go down there and remember you and bring you to the surface. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is entirely olfactory, right? These are smells that the necromancers are bringing down, coming up, and describing to you.
And this is why fart jokes are so funny?
Yes. Okay. So it's about the cosmic queef, right? So you have to make yourself the cosmic queef.
Oh, gosh.
Go across the river.
Sorry, Snap.
No, atomize yourself as the cosmic queef when you die. Right? Cerberus smells you and goes, that's a good one. Allows you to go into the underworld, right? Cross the river Lethe, cross that river, be atomized in the river memory. Okay. So that you can be remembered by those who go in the underworld. Those who go in the underworld and come back up are psychopomps, shamans, the necromancers, right? And what they all describe is this experience cannot be captured in words. So they do their best to try, right? The principle, the mystery, right, is that the logos is insufficient to describe the mystery. You can only do it olfactory. So you have to smell the roses while you are alive and smell as many different things, the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have all of those experiences, the more you have in your acoustic records of your aromatic
record.
It's close enough. The caustic record that's in your aromatic soul, when you go into the underworld, you are providing more for the necromancers to remember when you become atomized and contribute to that river, right? That is the goal, right? You are then taken and somebody takes a scoop of that river, a necromancer, they take a scoop over here and they take a scoop over there, and then they come up and say, and your soul is only one of the memories that necromancer scooped and brought back up, right? Does that make sense to you? It's all in our book. It's all in our book.
How do you mythologically tap out and go, I've had enough?
It's all in the book.
Wildness. It's all in the book.
It's all in the book if you read the book.
We should start winding down here and talk about the book. When is the next volume coming out? If people want to collaborate with you all and contribute to the next volume, how do they get in touch?
Skobie1@gmail.com. Send me your submissions. We have yet to say no to anyone. So
beautiful.
Yeah. And that actually says more about the fact that this is like an esoteric, as you get the jokes, you get better at the jokes. So like it's not gatekeeping. Cerberus is gatekeeping, right? It's not me doing the gatekeeping. It's the community that the diatribes are there to be this grinding thing that you need to get through to be in on the joke, right? But once you get in on the joke, it's like, oh, this is actually kind of a thing I want to contribute to, and I'm really actually proud to do it. But you have to get through all of these layers of nonsense, the Hecate and onion, the you know, what the onion of Hecate, what is it, the Shrekete, right?
Shrekete.
It has all of these layers of
Shrekete.
onions.
I
It's
like it.
Shrekete, right?
Shrekete, God.
Well, I've had people ask me like,
That's
what can I
server-
submit or
that's
what
serious.
should it be? Does it have to be about this or that? And I said, no, send whatever you want. Like,
Whatever the muse provides.
it doesn't
It should be
you know.
something that's, you know, when I look at what you guys are doing, it should be something that's at least irreverent, if not funny.
Yeah.
And it should be somewhat connected to kind of myth. But other than that, there isn't really much that unites everything.
No.
You know, and even that myth stuff is extraordinarily loose.
I would say the only thing that unites everything, excuse me, is the bounding on the book. That's literally I have yet to. There was somebody who was like sending me something or like, oh, it's got to fit this. I'm like, no, you do whatever you want. No, like you don't have to talk about Greek. It's not about that. Like the only thing that binds us is the book, literally.
Right. It's about documenting a community over time and having fun.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
You know, it's that it's rhizomatic in its, you know, in its nature, where, you know, everybody kind of comes at it there. Everybody who contributes to this is, you know, what we call, you know, one of the members of the chorus of the frogs, right? And what do frogs do, you know, at the when the weather gets cold? You know, they go under the ground in the mud, you know, they're right. So, you know, the better you are at, you know, understanding what it is to be like a rhizome, the more you are like a little frog potato. And, you know, when you come up to the surface, you can croak and croak and croak and coax, 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 you know what I mean? So, you know, the point is you know, living in the moment and being in your own little froggy hole and, you know, riding that smelly yuga, you know what I mean?
Smelly yuga.
You know? The Cowabunga, ride the wave of the cosmic queef, you know what I mean? The smelly yuga.
This was so much fun, guys. Wild times, ridiculous.
Thank you for having us, Snappy.
You know, I always enjoy chatting. Sorry I didn't talk more to you, Skobie.
No, this is I expected this 100%.
Yeah, this is so much fun. We'll have to get together again soon.
Absolutely.
Hang out. I always enjoy it, you know. Remember, guys, take everything was said here with the grainiest of salts, because we're just, you know, we're throwing shit at the wall. This is satire. There are truths here and there are falsehoods and everything in between. It's more about the fun of it and the wildness of it. But, you know, trust your nose. Go into that underworld. Contact the dead. Have a little fun. Live life, right?
And live death. You know what I mean?
Death. Beautiful. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to call it. Any last words for the audience before we say goodnight?
Yeah, you know, just remember, follow your nose. If you die before you die, you won't die when you die. Free Palestine. Believe all women except Ayn Rand.
Right. Oh, wow. Peace and love, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and take care. Have a wonderful night.